So now that we have a definition and we understand what the scope of the conversation is, now let's talk about the ecosystem that you got to have in place to be able to understand how you're going to bring all this together. So as you're building a program, you really have to take into account the entirety of your ecosystem. And an ecosystem is really just it's a network of all those technologies, both IT systems, those non-security solutions, but also those security solutions. And really the idea is that they work together to protect the online information and the technology networks that you're utilizing. And so the idea is that you have to be able to bring together all of these solutions in a way that is able to allow us to capture telemetry of data from them that will give us visibility into what are our assets. Because assets, everything is an asset when you're talking about cyber risk governance, whether it is hardware, software, or processes, all of those things. It really is part of what you have to know in terms of what are your assets. And I'm going to show you why I say assets. Everything is an asset in just a moment when I show you the what I call the master risk taxonomy. But it's IT asset management, it's vulnerability management, it's threat detection and prevention solutions. But then it's also being able to both qualitative and quantitatively frame up the risk. So being able to do risk management, both qualitative and quantitative. And I am going to try to advance the slide, but I don't. Thank you, Christine, because I don't see that little button. But so I was just talking about that master risk taxonomy, and I apologize. My little red circle bubbles are off here. But what I want to do is point out there are 6 key questions that are answered with this master risk taxonomy. And this is really the foundation of a cyber risk governance program, and being able to present information to both the C-suite and the board, which is I call when I talk about reporting up, down, and across. The up is up to the C-level and the board. Down is down to the technical and operational level, and across means both technology and business management functions. So everyone needs to have visibility to be able to understand what the risk is and the potential impact to their areas of responsibility. So I want to point you to let's start to the left here. Sorry, right there. So what's at risk? Those business assets. And if you look to the left of that, you see we talk about money, so revenue, cash, all of those different things, data. Whether it's PII, PHI, PCI, intellectual property, or otherwise, all of the data that you have in those systems is what's at risk. But then also, when you look at things like future earnings and enterprise value, people go, well, yeah, that's an asset, but how does that relate? What risk are you talking about there? It's strategic risk, because every organization I know of that exists has a corporate objective to grow revenue. And so what's at risk is that growth opportunity, because the first rule of growth is you have to prevent shrink. So if you're losing revenue, then you can't grow. So that's that strategic risk that we talk about. And one of the things that I say is cybersecurity and its capabilities don't generate revenue. However, they do protect the generation of revenue. So those are the things that when we talk about assets, that's the strategic risk we're talking about. But then you start to wonder, okay, well, the next question that you get asked is, how are we defending against an attack? And that's where you talk about these the defenses that you have in place. So in this overall master taxonomy, there's a section for that. It's where you understand your network layout, whether you're on-prem, cloud, all of those different things, the controls that are in place, the people and the processes that you have in place to defend your organization. But then it's like, okay, why would it be us? Well, there's a company threat profile and understanding why you would be attacked. And that's where threat intelligence gets applied to be able to understand as part of the algorithm to develop that qualitative and quantitative view of why you would be attacked. That's the probability. when you start to think about that. Now it is okay, an attack has occurred. So the first thing they want to know is, what did the attack do? And that's where you look at the attack profile up here and the information that you gather from that. So as you can see, all of the data and information that has to go into that has to be taken into account to be able to have effective cyber risk governance also plays into how you are able to present that argument for materiality of whether it was a material attack or not, because you're collecting all of the data, and I call it the aggregation, correlation, deduplication, normalization, prioritization, and visualization of that data is what gives you the final output for being able to defend your organization. So now the next question is, all right, well, what did they take? What are the losses over time? What was the time period of what was taken? Or if we are just doing a Monte Carlo simulation, we want to predict what could we lose? That's what this question is all about. And then the last question you want to ask is, why us? Why did they do this to us? And it's because that attack profile points out that there are things like these toolkits. So we're talking about API security today. Well, that is one of the opportunities that that an attacker has to be able to get into the environment. It's one of the keys to get into your environment. I think identities are the number one thing, and non-human identities are present in APIs. Whether it's a token or whether it is some type of session, um, cookies or other things, those are non-human identities that are part of access to the environment. So um, that's that. So if and by all means, if you have questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. I'm more of an interactive presenter. I like to take on questions as I go through things, but we'll move on to the next slide. So what are the goals and objectives for cyber risk governance? And I won't read this slide to you, but I'll just point out to the right there the objectives. We want to make sure that we have metrics that are aligned to the broader business strategy. We've known for years that we have to align with the business, right? So being able to provide visibility into risk from as a result of a cyber attack, but also from the use of technology. I'll point to the global IT outage of July 19th is what I call it, and what it's widely referred to as. And it was the CrowdStrike update that triggered an event with the Microsoft operating system and caused outages, worldwide. Well, that was a technology risk that occurred, and it could have been any solution. It wasn't anything that I think CrowdStrike did wrong, and by no means, I am a member of the crowd, if you will. I am a protector. I utilize their solutions in our organization, but it could have been any software because there are 2,000 drivers, I think it was mentioned, that operate at that kernel level that could have caused that could have triggered that. So that's a technology risk we have to be able to identify. So APIs, you think about it, they're resonant. Every solution that we implement uses an API to connect and integrate and with other solutions in my environment. So are these cascading risks that occur. And so it is that technology risk or that cybersecurity risk could trigger operational risk, financial risk, strategic risk, regulatory compliance risk. It just continues to go and go. Reputational risk, the damage to your reputation as an organization. So there are cascading risks that could be the result of the inherent and or residual risk with technology, and API security and the capabilities you have there are part of that ecosystem. Just kind of continuing to move on in the interest of time, but it's about having an enhanced understanding of your cyber attack surface. And with APIs becoming very prevalent in everything that we do today as we deploy technologies, whether for the use by the business or to protect the business, it's understanding that attack surface and being able to profile that risk so that we can prioritize where do we need to focus in terms of remediation or configuration management in order to be able to have the controls at a level of maturity that protects our environment. So just a little bit about the Fair Institute standard that really is kind of the de facto standard, if you will, when it comes to trying to quantify cyber risk. And as a member of the Fair Institute Board of Directors and presenting at FairCon next week, we're talking about what actually are the core components of, or what exactly are you trying to accomplish by using the Fair Institute standard? And so FAIR is the factor analysis of information risk, and it is about understanding the rate of incident, the probability of success. What could my first party loss potential? What's my potential first party loss, as well as my potential third party loss? And here you see just some examples of the types of things and/or definitions related to that. And this, in a nutshell, is what we're trying to accomplish. We want to be able to quantify the risk in terms that can be understood by the different levels of an organization. So, for example, the C-suite wants to understand in some, whether it's monthly, quarterly, semi-annual, annual, whatever cadence is meaningful to them or that they want to see. They want to understand what is the probability of success. That's the number one question that I get asked at board meetings, and just presented to our board yesterday. And that was one of the questions was, we have a competitor who has suffered a cyber attack that they've acknowledged publicly, and their organization is still down. They've been down for coming up on 3 months, and they are trying to return to operations. But so our organization wants to know, what is the probability of success of something like that happening to us? And that's what cyber risk governance and risk quantification as a means for providing visibility give us, is a view into what that looks like. And I'll show you here in just a moment a couple of screenshots of kind of how we do it. The data is all sample data, but and thank you. You read my mind there, Christina. I appreciate that. But let's take a look at some of that sample data. So as I mentioned, we are a customer of a number of different security solutions, APIsec being one of them, CrowdStrike and others. But what we do is we use a solution that does that aggregation, correlation, and deduplication of all that data. So it's coming in at a very detailed level of information from all of those different solutions that are largely detective type solutions. They detect vulnerabilities. So they are scanning technologies that will identify vulnerabilities. So in the case of API security, it's understanding where do I have the OWASP top 10, if you will, from an API security standpoint, or what are the vulnerabilities that I have? What are the weaknesses that I have? And all of that data is pulled into this platform where it is all aggregated, correlated, deduplicated, normalized, meaning, okay, I'm like for like across the platform. And so now I can identify that if I fix a vulnerability in area A, it's going to resolve it in X, Y, and Z. So I can see and understand how those are connected. So you have to understand it and connect it at a very detailed level before you can roll it up. So now that we collect it here, and if we go to the next slide, you'll see a different view of it from an IT management standpoint. I can identify in a roll up that by the applications or business functions, lines of business, I can see where those issues lie and prioritize them. So if you can look at the top right corner of the heat map there on the left, you'll see that tells me that I should be focusing on these top 15 things, because as of everything that went into that funnel, it comes out at the bottom in terms of what's the priority. So really, I should be focusing in this example on 2.8% of the issues, which are represented by the top right quadrant of that heat map. And so now I can get a much more focused view of where I should be focusing my efforts and not be chasing things based on a simple severity rating, because you have all of the different severity ratings out there, and depending on what solution it is, they use different ratings. You look at things like Tenable uses a prioritized rating, and it's based on their formula, but it takes it this approach takes all of that data and it normalizes it so that now I can compare apples to apples, but I can also get a maturity score across my applications, and I can look at trending. So these are things from a management standpoint. I want to make sure that the team at the operational technical level are working on all of the right things. And then what I want to do is take and go up to the next level. So on the next slide, you'll see where we now start to take an executive look at it. And now I get to understand, based on all of that detail level that's been summarized up to a point of, and taking into account the maturity of the controls, where my risk lies. And so in this example, you can see that application C has the highest loss potential from a financial standpoint, because as we look over here to the right, it shows that using that standard calculation and algorithm that the FAIR methodology gives us, and using that risk taxonomy, we're taking all of that and bringing it together and saying, okay, based on all of the information that we've put into the algorithm, what came out of it is that based on the applications that you have profiled, the controls that you have in place, it says that application C is your highest, has the highest max loss potential for a single loss event of 28.2 million. Now, keep in mind, this takes into account the actual revenue generated by the organization and or broken down by function. All of that data comes from the organization provides me with that data. It's not a number that I bring out of thin air, because that's always going to be the CFO's question. How did you get to that number? What did you start with? And well, I started with the audited financial statement, and that's where I got the revenue number from. It's where I get the number of locations. It's where I get any amount of money we've invested in intellectual property for new products and all those things. All of that is part of the equation. And so that's why I can say I have confidence in the number, and I can show them how we got to the number, because now it also, there are two factors here, not just the max loss potential. So they see that dollar amount and go, ooh, that's what we should focus on. Well, no, it's also the probability of success, because if in this example, if application C had a lower probability of success but a higher max loss potential, and application A had a higher, let's say application A had a 50% probability of success. That means that the controls we have in place are not as mature as they should be, and therefore success is more likely, because it's a less difficult path for an attacker to navigate, and it's also a higher probability of, so it's higher probability in terms of the threat profile, but also the level of complexity and effort required for an attacker to achieve a successful attack. So now what this does is this puts the business owner of the risk. So let's say the COO was the owner of application C. It was part of their business function, and it could disrupt operations. So now they've got a business decision to make. Do we? So now they get an opportunity to buy into the decision making process, and it's not me saying I think we should do X. It is the executive saying, well, we have to do Y and here, because it could impact our business and our organization.